Bom dia a todos, obrigado pela vossa presença. Em nome da Universidade de Porto, do PTEC Pink Políticas Criativas e, acima de tudo, em nome do Future Places, bem-vindos a esta sessão da manhã. Vamos ter essencialmente duas atividades. A primeira seguir-se-á já de imediato e é um keynote address da professora Nancy Schiesari. Nancy, welcome and thank you so much for joining Future Places. It's great to have you here. A seguir ao keynote vamos ter uma apresentação dos nossos laboratórios de cidadania, as mais diversas atividades que pretendem capacitar os cidadãos de formas criativas. Portanto, se quiserem ficar para ouvir o que é que se vai passar durante a semana nos nossos workshops e já agora também experimentarem pequenos exercícios daquilo que nós estamos a propor, será um prazer acolher-vos. Já sabem que todas estas atividades são gratuitas. I would like to invite my colleague Karen Gustafsson to introduce our speaker, and then we look forward to listening to what you have to tell us. Karen, thank you.
Yeah, we are very fortunate to have one of our production faculty in radio, TV, film, Nancy Schiesari, come to do the keynote today. Nancy is a director of photography and director and a documentarian whose work has appeared on BBC, National Geographic, the U.S. Public Broadcasting System. And she'll be showing some clips from her work and speaking on the transition from analog to digital in film.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you so much for being here on such a beautiful sunny day. I want to thank ITOR for inviting me, and Sharon Strover and Karen Gustafsson and all of you here. I love being here in Porto. I was here in 1995 when I was still shooting films, and I was shooting a short documentary for the BBC on Women in the Waves, which was a movement to legalize abortion in Portugal when it was still illegal. And we were mainly in Porto because a lot of the interviews were here with people who had experienced death in their family because of backstreet abortions. So to come back in this capacity is really, really great. So I'm going to share with you, because of my years, the experience of starting, first of all, going to art school as a painting student when we were still painting and there was nothing digital around. And then from there, I wanted to become a cinematographer when I saw a very groundbreaking film for me by Ken Loach called Family Life. I don't know if you know this director. He's a social realist. Well, I saw that film and I was still painting. I said, whatever that is, I want to be part of it somehow. So then I put two and two together and said, well, let's see if I could still frame in light, I could work with people like Ken Loach. Never quite happened, but work with people who want to make a difference in society. But I could still have my cake and eat it too. I could still paint with light and frame, but in movement this time. So then I went back to film school and went to the Royal College of Art, where many people here, I'm sure included, have studied. And at that time, it was the 70s when there was a very orthodox view about filmmaking and narrative. It was very rigid. You didn't have a kind of pluralism of ideas. It was kind of a structuralism imposed, Marxist. We were all kind of Marxists in one way or the other, and but when it was applied to form, it became very rigid. So when I got to film school to make these kind of emotionally moving films as a cinematographer, everybody was anti-emotion. Brechtian deconstruction was in. So anytime you made a film, you had to include within it the language of deconstruction to remind the audiences in a Brechtian sense, you're watching a construction, you're watching something that was made. So it's the actual antithesis of the way films are made today, where you have suspension of disbelief. You want the audience, you want to draw the audience in with emotion. You have to be able to manipulate film, and especially documentary, because documentary, as you know, is made up of a lot of fragments of time moments, thoughts, interviews, B-roll, what they call, or just shots of things, and then you have to construct it in the most fictitious way possible to be able to render some kind of suspension of disbelief when you're watching it. So you apply many narrative techniques of three-act structure to the documentary. Characters are established. They you can see one right here. They go through obstacles. You start to identify with them. that somehow they want something, they have to go through progressive complications. All the things you're learning in screenwriting applies to documentary as well. And then it has to be a kind of a crisis moment or an apex of some kind, where then there's a sort of resolution of one kind or another. So these are all really, really hard things, and anybody who's tried to make a documentary knows the shooting part's almost fun. It's post-production and making something work and editing, which is the bear. It's very, very hard. So I came to Austin after working in London between the age of 19 and 40. I then found myself in the States with 2 small children, and I was offered a job at the University of Texas. My original goal had been to stay in the Bay Area in California, but I ended up in Texas, which is, of course, Austin is, if any of you've been there, realize it's a little oasis. The university is an amazing place. There are people from all over the world. So I've made Austin my home, and again, having the opportunity to be with intellectuals, not just film production people. That's what's really great about our department. And Sharon didn't think twice about asking me to do a keynote speech. I'm not an academic in that sense. I don't write papers. Everything I've learned is basically from the street and from experience through the lens. And those of you who work in documentary know that the camera is your tool to enter into people's homes and into their hearts, and they give you back as much as you are there as a witness to have them tell your story, their story. So this talk is called Distant Voices, Digital Presence, because digital technology has allowed for so many more voices to be heard that before just wasn't possible, wasn't financially possible. Compare one roll of film that lasts 10 minutes, a 400-foot roll loaded in a magazine of 60-millimeter film costs $100. That's 10 minutes. So you do one interview with someone, the maximum was about 3 rolls, 45 minutes you would interview someone with. Bingo, it's almost $1,000. Not even to talk about what the crew, when you went out to shoot a documentary, you had the cinematographer, you had the camera assistant that was loading the magazines, you had a spark or an electrician to put the lighting, you had a researcher there usually, a director, and sometimes a producer. All of those people on a living wage, usually, under the line as it's called, not under the producer and director is below the line, and that was always a struggle because you probably were freelancing if you were a cinematographer. But so just one interview, one day shoot would be $2,000 or $3,000. So anyway, I'll go ahead and start the talk that I co-wrote with Karen. Thank you, Karen, so much. As a wonderful writer, she helped me craft this paper. And so I'll just read from it and stop and talk and show some of these clips that sort of document a little bit my history going from 35 millimeters as a cinematographer to then coming into teaching via shooting on digital, which is another was an amazing liberation. I'm probably talking too much already about my paper, but those of you before, you're all young in the audience, you've probably never experienced this with people with a camera, where you have a 60-millimeter camera or even a Betacam, and half of your face is closed like that, and the other eye squinty. So the revolution of having a flip-open monitor allows you to hold the camera here, allows you to have body language with your subject, eye contact, all those things, and even to direct, talk, and ask questions while you're shooting them. That is a huge physical revolution in terms of how you make film. So I'm going to show you possibly a clip from that, but maybe I'll skip that and go to the last 2 pieces. But so let me start this paper. And any questions so far? As I've sort of said, this is a lab. It's not really a it's not, so anywhere you want to stop, we can talk or have questions. How's the sound? Do I need to talk loud? Okay, so During the last 15 years, there's been a revolution in filmmaking as professionals and amateurs migrated from analog to digital technologies. This transition has had profound implications for the media industry, the accessibility of media production tools, and for filmmaking as a means of cultural, political, and artistic expression. The transition from analog to digital has meant the compression of time and also a change in our relationship to our surroundings and how much of it we choose to document and remember. When I began a career in cinematography in the 1980s in London, there was a strict protocol for gaining experience in the camera department and a period of working up the hierarchy within the department. One advanced from loading magazines as a clapper loader to focus pulling as first assistant to operating the camera and aspiring one day to become the director of photography. This process could take anywhere from 3 to 7 years. Even to begin one's career working professionally in the TV or film industry in Britain, one had to be a member of the Association of Cinema and Television Technicians, the ACTT, as much an elite guild to newcomers, to keep newcomers out as it was a labor union. The number of women and minorities in the ACT camera department could be counted on one hand, and I was one of them for a while. It was almost impossible to even get a foot in to begin climbing the ladder in the first place. Actually, this trend, even though we've been talking about how digital has made such a big revolution in terms of accessibility to everyone to make films, but in 2012, 89% of the 250 top grossing films had no female director, and only 2% of these films had a female cinematographer. That's today, that was 2 years ago in the statistics. So no woman has ever been nominated for an Academy Award for Best Cinematography. Cinematography has always had a mystique around it, similar to the aura of what Walter Benjamin talks about in the age of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. Ironically, not in being a singular work of art, since film cameras expose negative that can be reproduced, but more in the act of seeing by one individual. The cinematographer, occupying a high status on the film set, was more like a magician than a technician, ready to do his magic in the black box and sharing the eyepiece only with the director before the shot was put into motion. Before the 1980s, when video taps could be attached to film cameras, only the director of photography knew what he was getting while shooting, and everyone else had to wait until the film was developed and a work print could be projected. The DP became the guardian of the image. So I'll show you a clip from Partition, which is a film that I was director of photography on and operating many moons ago. And it was a film for Channel 4 about the partition of India, kind of a poetic, experimental feature film shot in 35. So, yeah.
It meant partition of India, partition of the Punjab, Bengal, and Assam, if so desired. It meant dominion status almost immediately. The Muslims, the Sikhs, and the Hindus were at least agreed on the sincerity of Britain, and they accepted the plan now proposed by
Now, gentlemen, this shouldn't take long. Let's hope that partition has not divided us. It's an arbitrary business. But the reception in the other wing is almost over. Lord and Lady Mountbatten just leaving. When the orchestra's finished, we'll be able to settle into the business of the day. So we won't need to be here all afternoon. The heat's pretty unbearable.
Money, money, money. How much for India and how much for poor, orphaned Pakistan? There is so much to sort out. They will be meeting for days. Even they don't understand what they have done. Partition is more than a line on a map. Some important English officers have kindly agreed to stay on for 6 months to help the transition. So nice of them. The English General Sahab will listen to both sides and then decide. He has the money, you see.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. So anyway, that was one long tracking shot that had no cuts in it, and it was flying with the crane over a table, and those were actors who got out of the way as the crane came over, and it was all post-dubbed. But it took about 9 people working on that shot. I was operating, I had a focus puller on one side, I lit it, and there was a crane operator and a track around the table and someone pushing the dolly, and of course a production designer, and just whatever. So those were, that kind of shot, you know, takes that kind of number of people and shot on 35 millimeters. So a shot like that, I don't know how much it cost, but it took a lot of craft behind it. And so the things that we work on, that I certainly work on today, which are, you know, with a camcorder and so forth, are not that complicated. But anyway, those were great moments, and great moments to work collaboratively with people technically like that. It was really fantastic. But I wanted to go back to this discussion a little bit of the cinematography. Oh, hello, how are you? Great to see you. Wonderful professor and friend. Going back to the idea of the magician, the craft that came out of the Renaissance of the cameraman or the cinematographer being elevated to a level which was that of the artist, as Giotto or Caravaggio or someone of that nature, and of course that's changing, that's shifting because of digital technology and production. And I want to show you a short YouTube video of Victoria Storaro, and how I just found this last night, and I thought this totally nails it when I was talking about the magician and being elevated and being the only one that can see through the viewfinder or knows what the image is going to look like. There's a kind of homage to him here, and he's in a chapel in Padova, Italy, where Giotto painted his first frescoes that are very much like scenes from a movie, and people who write about film talk about the Renaissance as being where the frescoes became like scenes, narrative scenes. Our first narrative experience was from a cathedral environment or a church environment where you had scenes and characters and so forth. But yeah, this is only 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes. Even the music is, so this kind of equation of the magician, of the artist, of the singular master, and Giotto or the Renaissance painters. And it's a very tragic loss in some sense. It is a very poignant loss to lose that kind of craftsman, and it's a phenomenal experience to shoot something like that and to be, you know, in the zone once you're shooting. Something that happens less and less with digital because it's such a present tense moment, whereas film is a nostalgic media because it's frame by frame going through the viewfinder, through the gate, and it literally records in a kind of history of time, of you know, memory as it goes through the gate, whereas video itself is produced with revolutions of, you know, outputs of electrons. So it's really a different medium. And if any of you have been on a film set, just before you go action, there's this kind of incredible, similar to that kind of reverence of everything goes absolutely quiet, as if a baby's about to be born. And then, you know, and then the take happens, you know, and so it's a very reverent moment. And, you know, it's just not the same on video. The good thing about video, of course, is that you have quick speed. You can play something back that you just shot. You have monitors everywhere, monitors in the next room. The actors watch their own performances now. They're no longer in this holy zone that happens, at this protected zone in a film that happens in front of the camera. It's very much like a birth scene. So that kind of magic's been broken, and people are going back to look at their performances, and it's a whole different energy that's there. Digitization began to affect cinematographers in successive waves between the late 1990s and early 2000, beginning with the digital intermediate process, a way of revising color and image effects. Films were shot on negative, transferred to digital, where the look could be manipulated and then transferred back to a print. Before the 1990s, there was a distinct separation between production and post-production. What the director of photography baked into the image was a distinct look, his signature and light, and defined his style. Today it costs $1,500 to print one copy of a movie on 35 millimeter and ship in heavy metal containers to theaters. Multiply that by 4,000 multiplexes in the US alone. Compare that with $150 for a digital copy on a digital projector. Once the apex of excellence in manufacturing movie cameras from the early 1900s, all three major companies, Germany's Arriflex, America's Panavision, and France's Aton, announced in 2011 they would cease production of 35 and 16 millimeter cameras. Today, Arriflex only makes digital cameras such as the Alexa, an advanced camera that rivals film negative in its ability to reproduce the same latitude of film digitally, capturing details in very bright and dark areas in the same scene, that previously only film could claim superiority over digital. I don't know if you remember, you probably always heard that, oh, video is not as good as film, and it doesn't have the same latitude, everything burns out in the highlights, you don't get any details there. Well, that's changing more and more with time as sensors get larger, even on DSLR cameras. But the Alexa is their showpiece, and they have an Anima now, a second camera that's cheaper to buy, but still, you know, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Today's digital filmmakers can immediately see what they have shot, and if they want, share it almost instantaneously by uploading it to video or YouTube. In documentary filmmaking, the accessibility of digital movie cameras and mobile phones and mini camcorders has removed the restrictions on citizens to document the world, blurring the distinctions between media professionals and amateurs. Users all over the world document everything from political protests to family gatherings, as cameras become an extension of themselves, mediating their experience of daily life. Social media has facilitated mass distribution. Google's YouTube, the largest video sharing site, claims over 1 billion unique visitors a month with 100 hours of video uploaded every minute. That's pretty intense. Wars, World War II, I, you know, as far back as your great-grandparents knew, were filmed by cameramen working for the mainstream media. But in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, young soldiers on both sides of the conflict uploaded videos of their war experience. On the one side, jihadists celebrate explosions caught on camera, pointing at an unsuspecting parked vehicle, while American forces document their victories and losses, some adding personal diary accounts, but in both cases, self-directed. This was the first time a war has been documented online by the participants themselves, both 20-year-olds, manipulating, very comfortable with digital uploading from their phones and everything. Syria has been a watershed moment for video documentation. Both the rebels and government supporters have made significant use of digital video technologies to document and distribute scenes from the war, including bombings and gas attacks. Syria is one of the most dangerous places in the world for journalists. At least 28 were killed in 2012, and places heavy restrictions on foreign journalists' entry into the country. Observers with mobile phone cameras and video activists have filled this gap in news coverage, uploading many videos to YouTube and other video distribution sites. While this wave of video documentation began with individuals shooting footage of the 2011 protests, these activists now organize media offices, some receiving video training from NGOs. Assad supporters likewise upload footage, many of them responding directly to rebel videos and questioning their authenticity. This highlights one of the primary issues associated with citizen journalism. How can truth be established in these videos produced by opposing sides? In either case, staged or not, the public now remains skeptical when their government presents only one version of the truth. The spread of digital technology has transformed journalism, launched media stars, and contributed to political revolutions and reform. At the same time, we often celebrate the good in new technologies while turning a blind eye to negative aspects like environmental damage from increasingly disposable hardware and the exploitation of labor, workers toiling around the clock to produce items they could never afford to buy themselves. One of the best documented examples of this exploitation is seen in the Chinese factories producing components of the Apple iPhone, a product like many other mobile phones that has helped make digital video production possible on a mass scale. While extraordinarily low wages and massive factories allow Apple to keep prices relatively low, the labor conditions in these hardware production facilities may include excessive overtime, dangerous work environments, and in some cases, worker suicides. On the consumer level, as a species, we are slowly undergoing physiological changes, body posture morphing into text neck, that stooped over, curved neck, all too familiar and often seen on street corners and at bus stops. Studies also show the emotional addiction humans have to these devices, known to affect neurological pathways in the brain, releasing reward-motivated dopamine. In other words, interaction with small mobile devices give us a warm and fuzzy feeling of being connected 24/7. Anyone who has lost, misplaced, or had a device stolen knows it is as if a part of us has gone missing. What does this shift from analog to digital mean in terms of artistic expression and one's understanding of the world? What can digital technology enable? And what does it teach us about being human? Does it enhance our sociability and satisfy our human instinct to be connected and to communicate? So I'm going to go on and segue into other positive aspects of shooting digital documentary. I already mentioned the flip-over monitor that I discovered gives the cinematographer the freedom to have eye contact with your subject, to interview them while shooting, and to float over your subject above and below, effortlessly moving in space around your subject with the flick of a wrist. So you're doing what's called coverage like this. Before, it was heavy cameras on a tripod. Now you can create space within the scene. Everybody who shoots now applies kind of narrative techniques to digital documentary, so you have a kind of establishing shot. Then you'll go in closer for a two-shot of two people talking. You might go over someone's shoulder and get their reaction on their faces. You'll switch over to the other side, get them, and you'll be doing this physically like a dance around these people while you're shooting, because this camera that you can hold now like this, suddenly you can suddenly get over the shoulder shot, under shot, going around, zoom out, and get a wide shot. You can do coverage for the editor, who then can create a scene in the editing room that is seamless and seems to unfold in real time, even though it might have taken you half an hour to shoot. So that kind of movement and ability to dance around your subject because of the flip-open monitor and the ability to handhold this instrument also means it's very easy and very quick to do, to shoot documentary. Let me show you, I guess I'll show you a clip from, it's from the DVD actually, and it's called Weaving Worlds. And this was a film, it was the first time I really shot for someone else with the camcorder. And he's a filmmaker who's from the Navajo people in the United States. He came to the University of Texas on a scholarship, and he wanted to go back and make a film about the exploitation of women weavers who weave these beautiful Navajo rugs. And he asked me to shoot it for him. I was delighted. He was one of my students, and I got a paid gig from a student who got a really nice grant from PBS. So we went to the reservation and lived there for 2 weeks. And that was the first time that I could do coverage like this within minutes and get several shots. And it was like, I realized using videography is like writing with film. You know, the translation of the word cinematography means to write with movement in light. Cinematography, graph means to write photography. And so with videography, it was literally writing with video images as quickly as you could write something. So I don't know if it's easy to, yeah, Weaving Worlds. How the West was spun.
French. Kia ani ita shiche to shinale to lakona le to hatskiarkie the ne awili hagi French. I received my master's degree in 1998. It's out there. I know what city life is about to as far as I want to know. Now I'm home. And as an adult, I want to learn about some of these things that I never really got a chance to experience.
So that was, you know, recording voices that really hadn't told their story about women Navajo weavers who traditionally would sell make those beautiful rugs for their family and also sell them at the local traders. There was only one trading post, and they didn't have the ability to go far and make a deal, so they would sell their rugs to the one and only trading post, and they were paid not for the value of the beauty of the rugs, but the worth of the weight of the wool, the price of the wool, whatever price that was on the East Coast. So their rugs were sold based on the weight of the wool. And Benny's grandmother had weaved, and he remembers that, so he was able to go back and make a film about from their perspective, their point of view. Again, without digital technology, we wouldn't have been able to make this documentary that was played on PBS and is still, you know, shown often. So let's see. Okay. Now another great thing about the cheap price of digital technology compared to film is that in film you would be very restricted in. I made a film for Channel 4 called Green Flutes, And it pretty much had to be scripted in advance because of what we were saying earlier. 10 minutes of film cost $100. So you had a thesis about what you wanted to prove, and you went out to the world and you found people and places that matched that thesis. So you didn't necessarily go out completely open-minded, but digital has allowed, one of the musicians yesterday talked about the randomness of digital technology. In a sense, you have that inbuilt with you now when you go out and make a documentary. There's a sort of element that you're not afraid of anymore. Before you had to prove your thesis before you got money from Channel 4, the BBC, that this was the film that was going to work. And now you go out and you take more risks, and you're also more open to, maybe you started with a thesis, but the reality is telling you something different. So you can go with that, and you can collect material in a way that, yeah, I'm going to collect this, I'm going to collect that, and then see how the truth plays out. That definitely changes something about the whole experience of making documentaries. And it also creates more time, unfortunately, in post, because you have hours and hours of footage. And one of the other things that say, you finish your film, which is usually about 56 minutes for TV broadcast, and you have all these stories and themes, subplots, sub-themes that don't fit into this 3-act structure of an hour-long documentary. You can't just plop it in and suddenly go off in another tangent. But what digital allows is the website, social media. So if I could pull up Tattooed Under Fire, this was a documentary I directed for the PBS, and again, it was based in a tattoo parlor across the street from a military base in Texas, the largest military base in the world, called Fort Hood, where soldiers were deploying to Afghanistan and Iraq. But before they would go to this tattoo shop across the street. And a friend of mine owned the tattoo shop, and one day she told me, she said, you wouldn't believe the stories that these soldiers, before they leave, are talking about and expressing. And then when they come back, and also the tattoos they're getting are no longer the kind of cliche tattoos that you get on the wall of soldiers of eagles or airplanes or bombs. They're very intense, subjective images that I said, God, only Salvador Dali could come up with an image like this. They're very interesting external images of what they're feeling internally on the unconscious level. And the unique relationship they have with their artist is a collaboration that doesn't really exist anywhere else, except maybe in the Renaissance, when the client would collaborate with the painter to kind of come up with an image that they would want in their chapel or their family home. So in some ways, the tattoo artist works as a spirit medium for the client, for the soldier, to bring out what he's trying to express. And he will work for a long time creating the right drawing. The soldier will bring in an idea, or will bring in an image or a newspaper or magazines or something. And together they will create an image that the artist then carves on the body, which is an impermanent object. In the United States, soldiers aren't conscripted. They volunteer, often out of economic necessity. But anyway, so they're handing their body over to the government to do what they want with it, put it in danger wherever they're told to go. So they have no control anymore of their body. That's what they're signing away when they take their first big paycheck. So underneath the uniform, there's a riot of expression going on, of artistic frescoes. The wealthy have, paintings in their houses and etchings and prints. Working guys in their 20s don't own apartments. They don't have houses, so often their body becomes their wall where they express themselves and pay a lot of money for those prints. $500, $600 will buy you a really nice etching. And so it'll also buy you a tattoo. But where was I going? I'm sorry, I'm deviating now. Yeah, so anyway, going about the excess of footage that you get with documentary filmmaking today. Okay, I was going in the tattoo shop over 3 years, meeting soldiers, filming their first tattoo, filming their story, and then asking them would they stay in touch via email during the war, and when they come back, would they allow me to interview them again and film whatever new tattoo they have on their body. So about 6 of them stayed in touch. And then there were other themes over those 3 years that were emerging. One was about gender and how the two genders are very polarized during war. Men who go to war feel entitled. Look, I'm risking my life. You know, you're a woman back home, not risking her life. You better be loyal to me. And if you're not, I'm going to come back and I'm going to shoot you in the head with the lover that I find in your bed. And this happens. It happened in Colleen. And there's a story in the tattoo film where they're talking about this happening to someone who was in special forces. He came back, he found his wife in bed with someone, he killed them both. Okay, well, that's what the Taliban does, right? That's what, you know, happens to women in those worlds. How is it that an American is able to get away with murder? And he was. For 1 month, he can claim PTSD madness. And also, the tattoo artist says, well, they've spent so much money training special forces, they're not going to give him up. So he didn't have to go to prison for that. And then there was a discussion in the tattoo shop among regular soldiers saying, I understand him completely. I would have done the same thing. So in that sense, this kind of entitlement, this gender polarization that happens because of war. Meanwhile, there are women who work in Colleen almost like a clan of people, and they target young 19-year-olds who've never even had a girlfriend, who marry the first stripper they meet, and then are able, by marrying the soldier, to get health insurance, things you take for granted, but in America, that's like a gold nugget to have health insurance, a place to live, you know, money coming in. So you have on both sides, you have this, as I said, you know, polarization of gender. And that couldn't make it into the final film. So where it existed is, if you want to scroll down to these little videos, these are 4 or 5 minute clips of videos that are also self-contained documentaries. And then the last one, actually, we had to make it 10 minutes. This one here is all about those issues, and also about the body itself. One soldier in the tattoo parlor tells a joke. He says, I have a tattoo on my penis that says your name. And, right, so what do you mean? And he says, well, if you're in a bar, you can say to a girl, I have your name tattooed on my penis. And she goes, no, you don't. And sure you do. And he says, yes, I do, I'll show you. He pulls out his penis, and it has your name printed on, literally written on it. And so he does this in the tattoo shop, pulls out his penis. And then he expresses how, as soon as a bomb goes off in Afghanistan, the first thing male soldiers do is they put their hands down there, you know, just to double check. You know, that's the most important, valuable part. You know, if that's lost, you know, it's a serious thing. So we have that in this piece, you know, where he just describes that. So again, it relates back to the theme of the body, of these pieces of parts that in some are now adorned with tattoos, but in some cases, what is the commodity that is being sold here is bits and pieces. And that's been the tragedy of these wars. They're not traditional wars where people, you know, die. They die by being fragmented into tiny pieces. 2 out of 3 American deaths in these wars have been the result of improvised explosive devices. Those are IEDs, bombs hidden under the ground, that cost $2 to make in somebody's kitchen. I'll talk a little bit about that with the next project, but I'll show you just 5 minutes of this. This is a compilation clip, so it's not, it's a trailer kind of thing that actually PBS put together for their advertising.
Tattoo I'm getting right now is an hourglass with wings flying through a thunderstorm, and it just kind of symbolizes my life going through up to where I'm at right now in time. When in uniform, I have to be the exact same as everyone else. I need to look exactly like them. Tattoos is kind of just like a way of me expressing myself and showing everybody else that when I'm not in uniform, I am somebody different. I am me.
Since the day we opened the shop, basically the only people we tattoo here are soldiers. They're putting their hearts and souls in these one-of-a-kind tattoos. It's my body, it's my life. This is my art, and I want to design it.
There's a tattoo coming along.
We're just about done with the drawing.
Is it ready right now?
Yeah.
So I'm working on this big Norse piece for my back. I'll put the Norse tree of life. Its roots are going to extend down to the Norse underworld.
Instead of just throwing a tree in the middle of his back, we're going to incorporate it with a Viking-style shield.
That shield thing is also part of that intimidation. A lot of ancient civilizations painted themselves up blue or green to intimidate their enemies. So tattoos kind of became a permanent war paint.
You know how many times I got smoked for having this tattoo? It's a fetus in a blender. I mean, come on now. Tell me that ain't funny. Guess we really don't know what we're in for. I mean, kind of look at this tattoo in a literal sense, the small child in a blender that doesn't know what's fixing to happen to it. You know, it's fixing to get all chopped up and chewed up and turn to mush. And I guess there's a possibility of that happening to me.
Since the day we opened the shop, that's all we've been hearing are their stories, their woes, their fears. You know, some of these kids are terrified to go.
And the ones that came back unscathed, you know, physically, still have some serious psychological issues, which from what I hear are hardly being addressed at all, if at all. It's just like Vietnam, they're just putting them back on the street like next.
Don't want to go back all that much. The whole glorious charges you see in all the movies, they ain't it. I don't mind fighting, you know, the whole warrior heritage thing I'm always talking about, but there's some aspects of this stuff that I'm just not looking forward to. You know, I had two friends burnt up in the back of a Bradley, you know, like melted into the structure of the Bradley. You know, you look at the news, yeah, you know, some poor soldiers got blown up. Yeah, I know, and there's some poor other guy who knew them, but scraped what's left of them out of the inside of the vehicle. This is one unfortunate thing I got going for me is I've been there before. I know what happens. I don't have the feeling of invincibility that some of the new guys have, you know.
So thanks to the website, you know, it just gives you so many options to, we had an option for people to download pictures of their tattoos and to share their war stories and lots of things like that, that before, without social media, wasn't possible. Okay, well, in the last few years, 3D video has become increasingly embraced by filmmakers. Werner Herzog used this technology to shoot the highly acclaimed Cave of Forgotten Dreams, released in 2010. After shooting in 3D for Pina Bausch, a documentary on German cinematographer Pina Bausch, Wim Wenders said he will never, ever make another documentary in 2D. This transition to 3D offers new possibilities and limitations. In my current project, Canine Soldiers, I wanted to use 3D to alter the viewer's experience of documentary with another way of handling space, and to encourage them to feel more affinity for the unique perspective of the film's subjects, military working dogs. canines. Maybe shooting in 3D can shake up the way we have become aestheticized to war images, especially from that part of the world, represented by two-dimensional, traditionally flat, sandy, and khaki-colored like the desert. These two-dimensional images we see on our televisions from Afghanistan and Iraq are what we have come to associate with the conflict. Flat images communicate very little about what it's like to search for IEDs, for bombs, or to develop a unique bond between two species in war, a canine and a human. 3D may be able to help documentaries produce a more visceral, physical experience, creating greater affinity between the audience and subjects. Maybe it can shake up traditional assumptions about the documentary form and viewing experience. 3D is also changing modes of digital video production, and in some ways reviving traditional film techniques. Transitioning from 2D to 3D, digital film directors must think differently. Instead of camera movement and frequent cuts, 3D is shot in long takes using the deep focus associated with filmmakers like Orson Welles and Jean Renoir, and celebrated by theorist André Bazin. Rather than experiencing space created by camera movement, coverage, and editing, the viewer's eye is encouraged to explore the space of the shot, freely roam from the background to the foreground. We were talking about how with, when you have the camcorder and you're shooting documentary, you're doing a lot of coverage to create the space for the audience to kind of live in that space inside the scene. So in some ways, the more coverage you get, the more you communicate a space, because after all, you're watching it in two-dimensional, so you're always looking for ways to increase the sense of space for the audience. Well, in 3D, it's completely the opposite. The more you move around, the more you'll get sick watching it. And so you have, going back to that long take, long mise-en-scène, you're giving the audience back the kind of freedom to look around the stage or look around where they want to see. And that does create a whole different way of operating. The experience of the filmmaker also changes as he or she hangs back with the camera rather than moving through the space surrounding the subject. The process of shooting slows down, losing the fast pace of 2D digital video as more time must be taken to set up shots. Long takes required in 3D shooting can also affect the interaction with the subjects. One stands and bears witness rather than dancing around them through camera movement. Digital video technology has brought 3D within reach of many filmmakers. For the price of a second SD card, going into the second, the two eyes on the lens, and avid editing, one can film in 3D reasonably cheaply just by the cost of an additional SD card. Cameras range, broadcast quality from about $3,500 up to, several thousand. So I just wanted to, I'm going to show you a long clip from the dog film, but it's not going to be in 3D because we're not there yet to show it in 3D. We don't have the projector and stuff. But Paul Valéry, who wrote in the 1930s, wrote this called Pièce sur l'art. In all the arts, there is a physical component which can no longer be considered or treated as it used to be, which cannot remain unaffected by our modern knowledge and power. For the last 20 years, neither matter nor space nor time has been what it was from the time immemorial. We must expect great innovations to transform the entire technique of the arts, thereby affecting artistic invention itself, and perhaps even bringing about an amazing change in our very notion of art. So he wrote that in 1931 at the cusp of, the great mechanical age of the airplane, the train, what the Italian futurists celebrated and the Russian constructivist Zega Vertov celebrated in his film Man with the Movie Camera. He suddenly, from being in the horse and buggy, Europe was in, this incredible ability to move and to put the camera in places that the human eye couldn't see before, from an airplane or from a moving train or so forth. So they were celebrating that as the effect it would have in art, and it did. It produced, we had cubism, we had constructivism, we had abstraction, we had all these amazingly different forms of art and dance and theater and painting and film. So it's obviously, we're kind of on that edge now with digital technology. Well, I'll just talk a little bit now to close about Canine Soldiers and why I'm doing a film about dogs. I think unconsciously is a way to connect with my older sister, who teaches animal studies and writes about melancholia and animals in the Renaissance. And we were estranged for about 10 years. She had 7 German shepherds that she trained, and she had 14 horses. 10 of the horses were rescue animals, and 3 or 4 were, proper horses that were, could perform. And yet she and I had a very, very complex relationship, and we were alienated, and she seemed to care more about all her animals than her family. But she lost all of that in a divorce, and she has no horses left, and she still has several dogs that she's waiting for them to pass on with time, with age. But we've become very close since then. And some of her ideas about animals really got me thinking. And when I was at Colleen in 2006, I saw a newspaper from the local military base, and it had a photograph of a woman soldier and a dog by her side. And it said something like, soldiers aren't the only heroes. So I said, that's an interesting thing. Maybe if people don't care about humans dying, maybe they'll care about dogs dying. So I said, okay. And I put that newspaper on my shelf. And many years, six or 7 years later, I took it down again, and I started thinking about it and writing a treatment and starting to make a documentary about it. And I wanted to do it in 3D because I thought, I hadn't seen Wim Wenders yet or Werner Herzog's film, but I felt that somehow you could get the kinetic quality of a dog moving through space more easily in 3D, just as an aesthetic choice. And later I started to think about the war as always being represented in flat, sandy-colored, two-dimensional images. So the fact I told you earlier that 2 out of 3 American deaths are the result of bombs that cost $2 to make in someone's kitchen, while the Americans kill the enemy with drones that cost billions of dollars and the smartest minds in technology designing ways to use digital technology to fight wars. But our own flesh and blood, our own American soldiers, are killed 2 out of 3 out of a bomb that cost $2 to make, and whose only defense against that bomb is relying on another species to save our lives, to save human lives. Another species that happens to be super hyper intelligent in smell, just as birds are geniuses in being able to see. So other species have something to offer us, and they are superior to our species in certain things. So what does that tell us about where we are on the planet as a species now, as a human, the top dog that we've been for so long, and that we've reproduced this European model from I guess from the Greeks that always placed, the apex was like this, white European men on top, then lesser men, then women, then animals. And we've gone around the world viewing the world in this paradigm. So that this war that we've lost, but 2 wars now, that has this extraordinary experience going on between the dog handler and the dog is, for me, it's mind-blowing. And the soldiers that become dog handlers are very different from the soldiers in the tattoo film. They don't go back to war to kill people, they're going back to save people. Kind of like St. Christopher with the baby Jesus on his shoulder. Well, St. Christopher and his dog leading people through the desert. Encountering, being able to, predict a bomb or find the bomb before it goes off. So I find that really, really interesting, and so we're making this film. It's been difficult, and it's also difficult to have those themes expressed, what I've been talking about and thinking about, just by seeing a soldier and his dog looking for bombs. So I've decided I'm really going to try and find interesting intellectuals, people like Donna Haraway. Temple Grandin has signed on to be in the film to articulate some of those ideas. Sometimes the handlers can, and they get very close. And that's one thing I like to do in documentary, treat everybody like they're super intelligent, and that most people are, just because they don't have a university education. They have insights that they've achieved in different ways. So many times you get incredible articulation from ordinary subjects. But as well, I'd like to kind of put it into out-of-the-box thinking about our existence as a species. Also, science has shown that we have a lot more in common with other species than we thought. We have 3 parts to our brain. The frontal lobe is where we do all our processing and logic and thinking, and that's the largest in the human species. But our middle brain, where we process emotion, is exactly the same as a dog's or a chimpanzee. So, you know, that's what's so fascinating about this relationship with the dog handler. They have to have a very strong bond for it to be successful. And anyway, so I'll show you these. It's a 12-minute clip. And then if there are any questions, these are, yeah. Go ahead and we'll play that. Wrap it up, yeah.
This job that we do is a very important job. And what we're training here are combat dog teams. And we're trying to train them to the best of our abilities to be able to go out and to support conventional and unconventional military, to help the tip of the spear conduct their missions and to fight the enemy and to actually save lives.
The threat is HMEs, homemade explosives. So if you see, we have whiskey-based peroxides and ammonium nitrate, just giving the students an edge on the terrorists because we have to always adapt to our training techniques. Matter of fact, we just developed a new training technique because they're bearing AIDS deeper. The dog has a sense of smell that can't be duplicated.
It's a funny thing that in our 21st century, very, very technologically intensive world, nothing is as cost effective as a properly trained substance detector dog. So working dogs have never been as important in terms of security as they are now. We're taking particular combinations of males and females that are very, very successful, and then we breed them together. At 8 weeks of age, they go out to a foster system where they learn how to bond with human beings. At the end of 5 months of the foster process, the dog comes back to the Air Force Base. The dog is certified in detection and in patrol, and then he goes to his field installation where he'll be married up with a handler and begin his career as a military working dog.
When the handlers get here, we'll ask them to write us basically a biography of themselves. And it gives us a sense of their personality. We always give them guidance on which dog has the most potential and which one would be the best for them. We always give the handlers the opportunity to pick their dog that they want to use.
Come on. When you say military working dog, I mean, she doesn't really want to be petted, but when she's inside her kennel, she loves love. She clicks with me. We're both hyper. We're both like to work. Come. Maya, come. I've always loved animals. My mom's always made fun, like, I was either going to be a dog handler or a teacher because children and animals just love me. Happened to just walk into being a dog handler, which was my dream.
We're going to Yuma, Arizona. You know, we're going to be doing several different types of training. And mostly it's all going to be operational type training. This is going to prepare them for a practical test that we're going to give them.
All of our training comes together as a whole to validate us as an actual dog team, put us through some different scenarios of village searches, building searches, just tactical movements to get ready to join the fight.
I spent about 5 years as a construction equipment operator before I got offered to be a dog handler. What we do is that we use the dog's hunting instincts. The need for food means the dog hunts to feed, to live. What we do is we kind of use that instinct and go, the dog needs to find the explosives to get his reward.
Pay your dog on source.
I had a guy in my unit, his name was Savage. He was hit by a vehicle-borne IED shortly before we were supposed to come home. And just hearing that these dogs can go out there and detect these things and find these things, it was just thinking, you know, if one of those things was out there, my buddy might still be here.
It's like soldiers, you train as you fight. I like to train as we are going to deploy. Saturday I try to go out with high energy and motivation, so therefore, you know, my dog's ready to work and build up that stamina, because you never know what type of mission might come down.
Sit. Yes. You did good on us.
She's coming around and it makes me happy. She knows that I'm not going anywhere. I'm the one that she sees in the morning. I'm the one that she sees throughout the day. And she knows that I'm her mom.
Bye, mamas. Say bye.
The stakes of not bonding with your dog or building that rapport, there's a lot at stake. Say, for instance, you're deployed and you're working with a unit on ground, and there's a possible IED and you have to go find it with your dog. If you send your dog out there and they're not actively searching and listening to your commands, but they're running all over the place, it can be detrimental not only to the dog, but to yourself and the unit on ground.
We are high-value targets, and there is a bounty on our heads. A high bounty on top of that. Me and Baco are very tight. We're very close to each other. Losing sight of him, having him get kidnapped, anything like that, I just don't want to lose him. We're close friends, and I don't want to lose him.
Almost every military working dog handler I've ever met is really, really, really attached to their dog. And their dogs work really, really, really hard for them.
We build emotional bonds with these dogs because we're with them for quite a while. There's that fine line that you have to follow to understand that the dog is an asset. The dog is a tool. He's assigned to the Army. We utilize the dog for a bigger purpose.
How's it going?
Good. Remember Baco?
Yeah, this is our guy that got hurt. How's he been doing?
Been doing all right.
So tip is fine, all that stuff looks good. Let's take a look at this puncture wound.
You want me to flip him?
Yeah, if he will.
All right.
I'll let you do that. He looks like he's gained some weight, maybe. He has 4 pounds. That's excellent.
Go. You gotta be a fighter. There you go,
Hey, bodies. This is just gonna take a while to heal. It is still open. The stuff that's draining out is clear serum, so that's okay. So I would continue to do the triple antibiotic that you put on there. Continue to keep that clean. It may take another couple of weeks for that to heal up, because it's just a real deep wound. But you know, if we tried to close it, it was probably just gonna get infected. So
yeah,
we'll keep it on some antibiotics till it's healed up, and if you can swing by the clinic and pick those up. Any other problems?
No.
Okay. Fantastic.
If you imagine, you know, athletic dogs, just like athletic people, what are the common problems you have? So we have a couple of different joints in the dog that we have issues with. Knee surgeries are one of the common surgeries that our orthopedic surgeons do. So this guy developed a knee injury. We have a lot of success with returning him to duty. And the big part of the dog's success is related to how well the dog accepts rehab. Obviously in dogs, they can't describe fear or nightmares. People can tell us what's going on, and we're certainly not saying that canine PTSD is the same as people PTSD, but there are surely a lot of the signs, the observable behaviors that are common between the two. The question might be, is there a cross-species comorbidity? If the handler's got PTSD, is the dog more likely to show signs like that, and vice versa? does it put either at risk if the other has got a problem? This affects the welfare and the ability of the dog to do his job. It's an issue of distress, but it also can affect people because the people that work with the dogs count on those dogs to help keep them safe.
My biggest fear would be not finding something and it's right there. And then find out that someone was on that same route, that same area, and got killed. That's my biggest fear, is overlooking something and someone gets hurt. Because that's something you definitely don't want on your conscience. Bottom left corner. On source. I personally want to find IEDs because I've been blown up. I've seen people blown up. I've seen people die from them. I don't want that to happen again. That's one more person that has to go to a family's door and say, I'm sorry, ma'am, I need to inform you. So I have no hesitations going out to find IEDs whatsoever.
Well, that's the, thank you for your patience and sitting through everything. We're going to take our discussions or questions outside if anyone has them because they're running out of time. And so thank you for being a good audience. Thank you, Pedro, very much. Excellent report. Really well. It was so smooth. Thank you so much. Possible. I couldn't have done this without you.
Micro.